During the COVID-19 pandemic, Melbourne, Australia went through one of the most intense lockdowns anywhere in the world. But behind those empty streets and closed doors, there's a fascinating story, one involving secret documents, a sworn confession, and a whole lot of questions about the legal grounds for its strict curfew. So let's dig in and find out what really happened. Our whole story really hinges on two crucial pieces of evidence. First, a secret government email that took more than 4 years of legal battles to get out into the open. And second, testimony given under oath by a high-ranking police inspector. You put these two together and they paint a pretty startling picture of how this all went down.
All right, let's set the scene. I want you to go back with me to Melbourne, August 2020. The city's in the grip of a second wave of COVID-19, and you can just feel the pressure mounting on the government. In this climate of fear, a city of 5 million people is about to be hit with one of the most restrictive public health orders you could find anywhere in the democratic world.
I mean, just try to imagine this. Every single night at 8 p.m. sharp, the entire city just goes silent. For almost 2 solid months, millions of people were basically under house arrest. They couldn't leave their homes at all between 8 p.m. and 5 a.m. No evening walks, no visiting friends or family. I mean, for a lot of people, it was an incredibly isolating and damaging experience. And this all happened so fast. On August 2nd, 2020, as that second wave was building, the government declared a state of disaster. They announced these really harsh Stage 4 restrictions. And the centerpiece of the whole thing was this unprecedented 8 p.m. curfew. And it wasn't short-lived. It lasted for 57 straight days. Now, the official line was clear. They told everyone, look, this is tough, we get it, but it's absolutely necessary. It's based directly on the advice from our public health experts, and it's going to save lives. But was that the whole story? And that's really the core question we're tackling here. Was this curfew, and especially the way it was enforced, actually legal? And that question brings us to our first huge revelation. It comes from a secret document that, believe me, officials fought tooth and nail to keep under wraps for years. That's how long the legal fight took, 4.5 years. That's how long the government fought a Freedom of Information request to release the documents behind the curfew decision. And you know what? When those documents finally came out, it became pretty clear why they'd fought so hard. This quote right here is an absolute game changer. It's from an email written by Dr. Finn Romanese, who was the public health commander at the time. And get this, he wrote this after the premier had already announced the curfew to the public. He's confirming in black and white that the idea did not come from his team of health experts. So right here, you can see the massive contradiction. The official story we were all told was that this was a health-led initiative. But the emails show it was actually a political decision made by the cabinet first. The health officials were then asked to come up with a justification for it after the decision had already been made and announced. The whole process was completely backward. Okay, so having a flawed decision-making process, that's one thing. But how is this curfew actually enforced on the streets of Melbourne? This is where our second key piece of evidence comes in, a sworn confession from a senior police officer that really changes everything. This statement is just a bombshell. Inspector Brett Kahan, the guy who was leading the police's COVID response, said this under oath in court. He admitted that the operational instruction given to every single officer was to stop everyone on the street, and he said it plain as day. There were no exceptions. And here's the huge problem with that. The law itself did have exceptions. The official written public health directions were clear. People were allowed to be out for essential work, to get food or medicine, for exercise, or for caregiving. So this police order to just ignore all those lawful exemptions was a direct contradiction of the very law they were supposed to be enforcing. Now, having a systemic instruction for police to just break the law brings up this really serious legal issue. It's called misfeasance in public office. It happens when an official knowingly or with just reckless indifference acts outside their power and causes harm. You could definitely argue that an order to ignore legal exemptions fits that description pretty well. Okay, so now we can start to connect the dots. You've got the flawed creation of the curfew, and you combine that with its unlawful enforcement, and what you get is this cascade of legal failures. It's like a domino effect. This is what lawyers call the double illegality, and it's a really crucial idea to get your head around here. First, the decision itself didn't have a proper legal or evidence-based foundation. We know that now from the secret emails. And second, the way it was carried out was also unlawful because the police were told to ignore the written law. And you can see how this creates a chain reaction. It all starts with that systemic no exceptions order. That means any citizen who was actually following the law, who had a valid exemption, could be unlawfully detained. Legally, that's called false imprisonment. And it gets worse. If a detention is unlawful, any physical force used by police during that stop automatically becomes battery. It's a legal domino effect. On top of all that, the curfew also seems to have failed 3 key legal tests under Victoria's own Charter of Human Rights. First, was there a rational connection? Well, there was no real evidence that people being out at night was driving transmission. Second, was it necessary? A blanket curfew was definitely not the least restrictive option they could have chosen. And third, was it proportional? The serious harm it did to people's freedom just didn't outweigh any speculative benefit. So, you might be thinking, why does any of this matter now? The curfew is long gone. Well, it matters, because this whole story really gets to the heart of a fundamental debate about governance, power, and our civil liberties, especially when we're in a crisis. And it all boils down to this one crucial point. A state of emergency gives a government extraordinary powers, sure, but it does not give them unfettered power. The rule of law still has to apply. It always has to apply. So what are the big lessons we should take away from all this? Well, first, any emergency measure has to be based on solid evidence before it's put in place. You can't just make it up as you go and try to justify it later. Law enforcement absolutely has to follow the law as it's written, including all the exemptions. And at the end of the day, the rule of law and basic human rights don't just disappear during a crisis. Transparency and accountability are non-negotiable. This whole saga leaves us with a pretty massive question to think about. When we're facing a real crisis, where do we draw the line between keeping people safe and upholding the rule of law? It's a tough one, and it's something we all need to think about long and hard.